I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't expose him online or show up at his door. I did something much quieter. 6 months after my ex left me, I found out I was still protecting him financially. And the moment I stopped, everything collapsed for him, without me ever saying another word. If you've ever been left carrying emotional or financial weight for someone who chose to walk away, this story is for you. Make sure you're subscribed, because some revenge doesn't look like anger. It looks like boundaries. For 4 years, I thought I knew exactly where my life was going. Not in a fairy tale way, not in a happily ever after montage kind of way, but in that quiet, adult certainty that comes from building something slowly with another person. Shared routines, shared stress, shared sacrifices, the kind that dawn to make good Instagram posts but feel real when you reliving them. We met young, but not naive, or at least I didn't think we were. We grew together. We fought sometimes, sure, about dishes, about money, about the future, but nothing that ever felt fatal. Nothing that suggested an ending. We lived together for 3.5 years, not casually, not trying it out. We packed up our entire lives and moved across the country together. Furniture, memories, expectations. When you do that with someone, you don't think you're auditioning. You think you're committing. Financially, we became intertwined the way couples do when they trust each other. Shared bills, shared plans, shared risk. I made about 2.5 times what he did, and I never weaponized that. Not once. If something needed to be paid and he was short, I covered it. If a move needed a down payment, I handled it. If a trip mattered to him, I made it happen. I told myself that partnerships weren't about keeping score, and I believed that until January. It wasn't a fight. There was no explosion, no cheating confession, no screaming match that ended with slammed doors. It was calm, almost gentle. He sat across from me, not crying, not shaking, just resolved. He told me we were on different paths, that he didn't see the future the same way anymore, that he still cared about me deeply, but something had changed. I remember nodding. I remember my hands feeling cold. I remember thinking this must be a conversation that leads to counseling, or time, or a reset. It didn't. It was the end. Out of nowhere. I didn't just lose a partner. I lost the future I had already started living in my head. The worst part wasn't even the breakup itself. It was the disbelief. 4 years. A cross-country move. 3.5 years under the same roof. And he had already emotionally left, while I was still building. I moved out in February, quietly, methodically, like someone dismantling a life they never thought they'd have to dismantle. Boxes, tape, the sound of drawers opening and closing in rooms that suddenly felt too big and too empty. But even after I moved out, I didn't cut him off. We stayed amicable, cordial, civil, because that's what emotionally mature adults do, right? Or so I thought. We still talked for a couple of months, not often, just enough to tie up loose ends. And there were a lot of loose ends. One of them was his car insurance. He had a BMW, a nice one, and because of my clean driving record, being on his policy kept his rates low. Especially in Southern California, where insurance prices feel like a punishment for existing. I asked him, calmly, to remove me from his policy by the end of May. Not immediately, not aggressively, just by the end of May. I also asked something else, that starting in July, he begins paying me back the money he owed. Money for his half of the cross-country move. Money for the down payment on that BMW. Money for an entire out-of-state wedding weekend for his sister. Flights, hotel, everything. Because at the time, he didn't want to use his credit card. At the time, I'd said yes. Because that is what you do when you love someone and believe you, or building a life together. And when I asked him now, months later, he agreed. No argument, no pushback. He said he understood. I believed him. That was my second mistake. Because the real fracture didn't come from money. It came from what he asked next. A few weeks later, he reached out and told me he was moving out of the apartment we'd shared. Downsizing. Getting a roommate across town to help with his finances. Then he asked me if I could help him move. Help him pack. Help him lift furniture. help him transition into a cheaper, easier life after he'd chosen to remove me from it. I remember staring at my phone for a long time. My chest felt tight. Not angry, not explosive, just hollow. Because it finally hit me. I was still being asked to support him, emotionally and practically, while I was still healing from the shock of being left. I told him no. I told him it hurt that he'd even ask, that I already felt like I was overextending myself by staying friendly when I was still deeply broken by the breakup, that he was the one who ended things, and I couldn't keep playing the role of emotional safety net. I was calm, honest, clear. He didn't respond with understanding. He blocked me, just like that. No conversation, no acknowledgement. One moment I was explaining my boundaries. The next, I was erased. And that was it. Months of silence followed. Months of healing. Of replaying conversations at night. Of slowly rebuilding a sense of self that didn't orbit around someone else's needs. By the time July arrived, I was in a better place emotionally. Not angry, not desperate. Just done. Or so I thought. Because one idle thought changed everything. And it led me to make one phone call. A phone call that would quietly flip the power dynamic for the very last time. I wondered, had he ever taken me off his insurance? And when I dialed the number, I had no idea that this small question was about to become the most satisfying ending I never planned. The phone rang twice before someone picked up. I almost hung up. Not because I was scared, but because a small part of me didn't want confirmation. There's a strange comfort in uncertainty. As long as I didn't know, I could still assume he'd done the right thing, that he'd followed through, that I hadn't misjudged him completely. But the line clicked. A calm, professional voice greeted me, pleasant, neutral, unaware that this call was about to quietly dismantle months of unspoken imbalance. I gave them my name, then his. Then I asked a very simple question. Can you confirm whether I'm still listed on this policy? There was a pause. The soft sound of typing. Keys clicking in a rhythm that felt unbearably loud in my ear. Yes, she said. You're still an active driver on the account. I closed my eyes, not shocked, just disappointed. In that moment, a dozen thoughts raced through my head. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he planned to do it later. Maybe it slipped through the cracks. But then another thought cut through all of them. I asked, clearly, calmly, with a deadline, and May had come and gone. I asked the representative to remove me from the policy. She explained the process, the confirmation, the recalculation. Her tone didn't change when she added almost casually, just so you're aware, removing you will increase the premium. By how much? I asked. Another pause. Approximately $200. $200 per month for his BMW. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there in silence. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt awake, like someone who just realized they'd been sleepwalking through their own boundaries. For months after the breakup, I had tried to be the bigger person, the reasonable one, the emotionally mature one. I swallowed discomfort to keep things smooth. I minimized my own hurt because I didn't want conflict. And all that time, I had been quietly subsidizing his lifestyle. Still. Even after he left. Even after he blocked me. Even after he disappeared. The realization settled in slowly, like a weight shifting inside my chest. I thought about the move, the down payment, the wedding weekend, the insurance savings. All the little ways I had made his life easier, without ever asking what it cost me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt clear. And clarity is dangerous when someone's been benefiting from your silence. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. Of course not. He didn't know yet. He would find out when the next bill hit. I imagined the moment. Not with glee, but with a strange sense of inevitability. $200 wasn't catastrophic. But for someone already struggling financially, for someone downsizing, getting a roommate, asking an ex for help moving, it mattered. And here's the thing that surprised me most. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. Because this wasn't revenge. This was correction. For the first time since the breakup, the consequences of his choices were no longer being softened by me. And the more I sat with that, the more moments from the past replayed themselves differently. The times he hesitated to pay for things, knowing I'd step in. The casual way he accepted help without urgency to repay it. The confidence with which he blocked me, as if he were done, clean, unaffected. He thought the breakup had severed emotional ties. He hadn't realized the financial ones were still cushioning his fall. Until now. Over the next few days, I kept expecting something. A message, an email, a notification. Nothing came. No apology, no acknowledgement, no repayment, just silence. And strangely enough, that silence did more than any confrontation ever could. Because it confirmed something I'd been resisting. He wasn't malicious. He was comfortable. Comfortable letting me carry weight that was no longer mine. Comfortable benefiting without accountability. Comfortable disappearing when boundaries appeared. And once I saw that clearly, something inside me finally settled. I blocked him everywhere. Social media, phone, every digital doorway he could have used to wander back in when it suited him. Not out of anger, out of finality. If I saw the money, I'd see it. If I didn't, I wouldn't chase it. Because the real cost had already been paid. And the lesson was worth more than the repayment. A few nights later, I was sitting on my couch, TV on in the background, not really watching. And that's when I noticed it. His Netflix profile. Still logged in. Still active. His name. His avatar. His viewing history. A small, almost laughable remnant of a life that no longer existed. I didn't click it. Didn't hover. Didn't feel tempted. I just stared at it for a moment and smiled. Because it was symbolic of everything. He'd taken what was convenient, left what required responsibility, and assumed the rest would just work itself out. But convenience only lasts as long as someone allows it, and I was done allowing it. What he didn't know, what he couldn't see yet, was that the real shift had already happened. Not on his insurance bill, but inside me. And once that shift happens, the outcome is inevitable. Because quiet people don't announce when they stop carrying you. They just put the weight down and walk away. There's a strange calm that comes after you stop explaining yourself. Not the kind of calm that comes from closure, but the kind that arrives when you finally accept that some people were never confused. They were just comfortable. After I blocked him, life didn't dramatically change overnight. There was no sudden surge of confidence or cinematic moment where I felt healed. Instead, there was quiet. Deep, uninterrupted quiet. The kind that leaves room for thoughts you've been avoiding. At first, those thoughts were uncomfortable. They showed me moments I'd rewritten to protect him, and to protect the version of myself who believed love meant endurance. I started remembering things differently. The way he never rushed to pay me back, because he knew I wouldn't press. The way he'd say, "I'll get you next time," with such casual certainty. The way financial responsibility always seemed to default to me. Not because I demanded control, but because I made things easier. I realized something uncomfortable. He didn't suddenly change after the breakup. The breakup just removed the illusion. When you're in love, you tell yourself stories. You tell yourself they'll grow, they'll catch up, they'll step up when it really matters. But when someone walks away and still expects access, still benefits from the systems you put in place, you start seeing the pattern clearly. I wasn't angry anymore. I was observant. And observation is where power quietly returns. I didn't reach out about the insurance. I didn't notify him that his rate had increased. I didn't send a message reminding him of the money he owed. I let reality do what it does best. Apply pressure. Because here's the thing about financial consequences. They don't argue. They don't negotiate. They don't get blocked. They just arrive. Month after month. And I knew him well enough to imagine the moment. Him opening the bill, furrowing his brow, scrolling, refreshing. That pause when you realize something has changed and you weren't in control of it. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd ended our relationship because he felt we were on different paths. And now, for the first time, he was walking his without my safety net underneath him. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't feel bad either. because the revenge wasn't an action. It was restraint. It was not fixing a problem that wasn't mine anymore. It was not cushioning discomfort that he needed to feel. For years, I had associated kindness with availability, support with sacrifice, love with flexibility. Now I was learning something else. Boundaries are a form of self-respect, and self-respect is expensive to people who benefited from your lack of it. As the weeks passed, something interesting happened. I stopped replaying conversations, stopped wondering if I'd been too harsh, stopped asking myself if I should have helped him move, stopped imagining alternative endings. The mental noise faded, and in its place came something steadier: self-trust. I trusted that I'd handled things with grace. I trusted that I hadn't acted out of spite. I trusted that I didn't owe anyone continued access to my resources, emotional or financial. That trust was worth more than the money he owed me. Still, life has a way of delivering small, symbolic moments when you least expect them. One night, weeks later, I sat down to watch something mindless before bed. Just background noise, comfort TV. The Netflix home screen loaded. And there it was again. His profile. Still untouched. Still there. I imagined him, somewhere across town, opening the app and seeing the same thing. 2 profiles, 2 lives that once intersected. I wondered if he'd noticed the insurance change by now. If he'd cursed under his breath. If he'd done the math. If he'd thought about reaching out, and then remembered he couldn't. I hovered over the option to sign out, not out of pettiness, but out of completion. Because this tiny digital thread, was the last remaining connection between us. I didn't rush. I let the cursor sit there for a moment. And in that moment, I realized something that made me smile. This wasn't about him anymore. It hadn't been for a while. The real turning point wasn't the insurance call. It was the moment I stopped needing him to understand. Because people who benefited from your generosity rarely recognize it once it's gone. They just feel its absence. And that absence speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. I clicked sign out. The screen refreshed. 1 profile remained. Mine, clean, quiet, undeniably mine. I turned off the TV, and for the first time since January, I slept without that low-level tension in my chest. No unfinished business, no unspoken expectations, no invisible support lines still running in the background. Just clarity. And clarity has consequences, especially for people who mistook your kindness for permanence. The story didn't end with fireworks. It ended with silence, the kind that follows after something heavy is finally set down. But what I didn't realize then was that silence would echo. Because when you remove yourself from someone's financial ecosystem, the ripple effects take time to fully reveal themselves. Silence has a sound. You don't notice it at first. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with drama or confrontation. It settles. In the weeks after I signed out of his Netflix and cut the last digital thread between us, my life didn't suddenly become extraordinary. There was no instant glow-up montage. No poetic justice served on a public stage. What happened instead was subtler and far more lasting. I started receiving my own money back in a different form. Not dollars, not transfers, but energy. The energy I'd spent managing someone else's instability. The energy I'd spent explaining my feelings. The energy I'd spent justifying why I deserved consideration. It all came back to me slowly, like circulation returning to a limb that had been numb for too long. And as that happened, the full weight of what I'd been carrying became clear. I realized how often I'd preemptively worried about his finances, even after the breakup. How I'd instinctively softened conversations, how I delayed enforcing boundaries because I didn't want to make things harder for him, as if his hardship was still my responsibility. That mindset didn't vanish overnight. It loosened its grip gradually, and with every day of no contact, the truth became harder to ignore. He hadn't reached out. Not once. No apology. No attempt to explain. No awkward message about the insurance change, which told me everything I needed to know. If the roles had been reversed, if I'd benefited financially from him, if he'd quietly removed a safety net I relied on, I would have noticed immediately. I would have reached out. I I would have said something. The fact that he didn't meant one thing. He noticed. He just didn't want to acknowledge it. Because acknowledging it would TV required admitting that he'd been leaning on me long after he'd decided he no longer wanted me. And that realization landed harder than any angry confrontation ever could. I thought about him sometimes. Not obsessively, not painfully, just in passing. I imagined the subtle changes, the tighter budgeting, the roommate negotiations, the moments of frustration when another expense came up and there was no one left to absorb it. I imagined him telling himself stories, that I was dramatic, that I was cold, that I overreacted. People rarely frame consequences as consequences. They frame them as betrayal. And I was okay with that, because here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. When you stop overgiving, people who were benefiting from it will always feel wronged. Not because you hurt them, but because you stopped helping. That's the price of reclaiming your power. And I paid it gladly. Months passed. My life continued to expand in quiet ways. New routines, new confidence, new peace. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed, stopped scanning rooms for familiar faces, stopped bracing for emotional labor that never came. And somewhere along the way, I realized I hadn't thought about the money in a long time. Not the down payment, not the move, not the wedding trip. It wasn't because I'd forgiven the debt. It was because I'd outgrown it. The cost had already been absorbed and transformed into something far more valuable. Discernment. I'd learned what it felt like to be the responsible one. I'd learned how easily generosity can slide into enablement. I'd learned how quietly people will accept support without ever questioning whether they deserve it. And most importantly, I learned this. Closure doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from alignment. From your actions finally matching your worth. The last time I thought about him intentionally was on an ordinary night. Nothing special. No anniversary. No reminder. Just a passing thought. I wondered briefly if he ever realized what changed. If he ever traced the shift back to me stepping away. And then I realized something else. It didn't matter. Because the revenge was never about him feeling punished. It was about me feeling free. Free from subsidizing a life that excluded me. Free from explaining boundaries to someone who resented them. Free from mistaking tolerance for love. Some people expect access even after they exit your life. They expect the benefits without the commitment, the support without the presence, the loyalty without the labor. And when that access disappears, they don't always rage. Sometimes they just feel the weight, quietly, persistently, forever aware that something they once relied on is no longer there. That's not cruelty. That's consequence. And the most chilling part? I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to raise my voice. Didn't have to demand repayment. Didn't have to prove a point. I just stopped paying for someone else's comfort. And that was enough. If you re-listening to this and you still financially or emotionally entangled with someone who chose to walk away, hear this clearly. You are not obligated to soften the consequences of someone else's decisions. Kindness without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. And self-respect often looks like indifference to someone else's discomfort. If I see the money one day, I'll accept it. If I don't, I've already been paid. In clarity, peace, and self-trust. That lesson was expensive, but it was worth every cent. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment and share your experience. You're not alone in this. Like the video if you believe quiet revenge hits harder than loud anger, and subscribe for more stories where justice doesn't scream, it whispers.